right, so here's an example of a recurring event. What this actually does is has a watch folder. So it looks for new files that have been uploaded to a particular path, and then it checks every, I don't know, I think I put 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes it's going to look and see if there's some new files in this drop folder. If they're there, it'll process them. And so what I do is I set the execution time limit to 0. The priority is set to low. And then it just iterates. It says while true. So that just means that this thing will run forever inside this asynchronous thread. And then it just iterates through the file directory. And if there's something to iterate through, it does something with it. And then when it's all done, it sleeps then for 10 minutes. It's in millisecond sleep, so you'll wait 10 minutes, and then it'll try it again. And it'll try it again, and it'll keep running until Lasso is restarted, or it should crash. All right. Of course, the challenge with these things is debugging them. There's several ways to do it. We're just going to run through them real quick. So the first and easiest way to do it is to test your code outside of the async, right? Just make sure that there's no syntax errors and that it works. So what I've done here is I've commented out the curly braces so that it won't run asynchronously. I left it running forever, and I left the thread priority. But what I've done inside my while loop, this is the exact same code we just saw that watches the folder. But instead, I just said after 10 times, then abort the loop and it'll drop out. So it won't run forever. You'll know though when you test it, it'll, if it runs through the first time and seems to work, you're probably pretty good. You get a syntax error right away. It's an easy way to just double check that your code at least seems to pass the parser. Another way to do it though, inside the async, is you can trap for errors using protect and handle. And what I've done here, you can see inside the sync tag, I have it where it logs to the Lasso errors that there was an error, and it tells what the error was. And you can also put in, since it's dealing with files, you could also trap for the file errors too. Does all this make sense so far? Am I going too fast? I know we started late, so I'm just trying to. All right, so here's some ideas for getting the debugging information out of it. You can send it to a file, you can send it to a database, the Lasso errors, Lasso console, email, little bars. I think that's pretty much it. And that's it. Sorry, it took a lot longer when I was going through it in front of the mirror.
If there's an error, will it send it to the error database as any other error that occurs?
The errors are recorded the same way they are on the normal page. So normally Lasso, if you have an inline error, say, Lasso doesn't normally record that, so it won't record it in here unless you take the effort to do so. So, and that's really the tricky. I think what happens for a lot of people when they use these asynchronous threads is, since there's no feedback, you're kind of just shooting in the dark. So you really have to use some of these strategies to give yourself a window to see what it's actually doing and when it's doing it, how it's doing it. Another idea might be to log how long the asynchronous thread is taking. So, because what happens is a lot of times is you'll give it a 30-minute for some long process to take place. You can say it only takes maybe 10 minutes. But there is a chance that you could have one day where it takes a lot longer, and then it gets terminated before it finishes. So having some window into how long your threads are actually taking, and have it, especially for a daily process that chugs through a bunch of records, you only have 100 records to begin with at the beginning of your project, and then 6 months down the road, business takes off, and now you got thousands. You're not going to remember this so much. So you definitely want to have a threshold that start a timer at the beginning of the page inside the synchronous thread and stop it at the bottom. And if that threshold goes over, if your time limit's 30 minutes and you might make the threshold 25, if this thing takes more than 25 minutes to send you an email. So then you'll say, okay, well, either I need to readjust what I'm doing in this asynchronous thread, or I need to give it more time.
Is the time pretty, is it stable? Is it Have you found it stable? Or?
Oh yeah, synchronous threads, yeah, it works great when you have it set up properly. I find the biggest mistake I make is when I'm testing it is I'll think, oh, it's fine. I'll make one small change, I think, oh, it's fine, and I'll shoot it off, and all of a sudden the whole server comes to a crawl, and I'll be, oh crap, and then I'm trying to restart it. And luckily, I do everything, on a development box, so I don't take down the production server. But those mistakes are easy to make, especially when you have a thread that, if you don't put the sleep in there, it'll easily just take your whole server down. So you have to make sure the sleep is proper. And even a sleep of 100 milliseconds makes a huge difference. So if you don't have that in there, it's not good.
With regards to priority for lower stuff and all that, I'm doing a lot of video conversions, which can take quite a long time. What happens with processes that you mark as being low priority? Do they get put on hold, or do they get?
No, they always will run. They just don't run. And that's probably more of a question for Kyle. But my experience has been, it's not. You never will have a situation where the thread doesn't run at all because there's too many high priority items. It just doesn't. I think what happens is Lasso. I mean, nothing actually runs in parallel because it runs on one processor, maybe two. So what will happen is Lasso will give it X number of milliseconds to execute, then it moves on to the next thread, and the next thread, then it comes back. So I think it just comes back to that thread not as quickly. So you'll find on a really busy server, I think those low priority threads will take slightly longer, but I've never had an issue where it didn't run at all. And the only issue I have had is when I didn't give it enough time to execute. I didn't anticipate that it would, on a production environment, it would take a lot longer. So you definitely have to set that limit. But you don't want to set it too high, because if you set it for 6 hours or something, these asynchronous threads, if they're a runaway thread, you can have a bunch of runaway threads. So I mean, it's the limitation is there to protect you from yourself. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. So I wouldn't say just let it go forever, even threads that you normally think are going to take 10 minutes.
I've had some luck with to write to a global variable, as you said, and then have a recurring AJAX script to check the value of that global variable, and then you can display information to the user. It can even be debugging or just the state of the script when sending like 2,000 emails. Now we have sent 200, we have sent 300. That has been working for me a couple of times.
Yeah, and global works as long as you use thread atomic, or if it's just a single user system, you can do that. I find I typically prefer to send the information to a database and retrieve it out of there, just
Right.
because it's a little safer when you have so many. If you have a busy system and you have a bunch of people accessing the same variable, it's probably just suspicion on my part. I try and stay away from using globals for that purpose unless I absolutely have to. Or if I know it's just a global for me to debug, then it's not a big deal. And plus, if you're on a shared system you're all on the same site, that global then gets shared. Anybody else on that same site will have access to it.